I sat at the polished oak dinner table, the silver cutlery cold beneath my fingers, my silk blouse brushing softly against my arms as if mocking the tension vibrating through the room. Across from me, Jason smirked like he knew every secret I'd tried to bury, his fork paused midair as if savoring the moment. Mom and Dad sat frozen, their eyes flitting between us, neither speaking, their silence sharper than any words could be. "You have 1 week to leave," he said, voice smooth, almost casual, like this was a joke I should laugh at. But I didn't. My chest tightened, and I felt that old, familiar rush of hurt and disbelief. I had worked too hard, fought too many invisible battles, to be cornered like this at home. I glanced at Mom. She touched her napkin, avoiding my eyes. Dad shifted in his chair, pretending to be busy with his glass of water. The quiet in the room felt deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping, steady, defiant. I had built a life outside this house, a life they didn't notice, a life they never understood. And yet, sitting here, under the weight of his smirk, I realized this was the confrontation I had always prepared for, whether I wanted it or not. I could feel the determination rising, mixing with that prickling anger in my chest. 1 week. Fine. Let him set the clock. I wasn't the same girl who once trembled in this room. It wasn't always like this. A few years ago, I was the girl who avoided eye contact, who flinched at every raised eyebrow from Jason, who wondered if Mom and Dad would ever really see me. I was 18, freshly graduated, and naive enough to believe that love and effort alone could fix anything. That evening, etched in my memory like acid, I had begged them to let me pursue my dream of opening a small design studio. My sketches, my plans, my carefully calculated budget lay spread across the dining table like fragile promises. "I can make this work," I whispered, voice shaking. "I've saved enough. I just need a chance." Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You? Running a business?"
"Don't make me laugh," he said.
The smirk was familiar, the same one I saw tonight, and it cut deeper than any knife. Mom and Dad just watched, silent, as if they were deciding whether I was worth their attention. I felt that familiar lump in my throat, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to make them see that I wasn't the child they had dismissed. That night, after their discussion, I walked out into the cool night air, clutching a small, leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me years ago. "Keep your dreams close," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "Even if the world doesn't believe in you, you must." The notebook smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, a reminder that someone somewhere believed in me when everyone else refused. I didn't return that night. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of them. I simply left, carrying my designs, my grandmother's wisdom, and a quiet, simmering resolve. I knew independence wouldn't be easy. I knew they wouldn't understand. But for the first time, I felt the exhilarating mix of fear and freedom, the knowledge that the path I chose was mine and mine alone. That small act of leaving, of standing alone, was my first step into a world where I would no longer be defined by the smirks, the dismissals, or the silent judgments of those who should have been my champions. I didn't know where the journey would take me, but I carried my grandmother's notebook everywhere. Each page was a silent promise, a reminder that someone believed in me when no one else did. I started small, a tiny apartment, a borrowed desk, a laptop that weighed more than it should have for someone just starting out. I took odd jobs, design gigs for local cafes, and freelance projects that barely paid for groceries, but each one was a step away from the girl Jason mocked and Mom and Dad ignored. It was there, in one of those late nights, coffee cooling beside me, that I met Eleanor. She was older, seasoned, and exacting, a woman who had built her own boutique design empire from nothing.
She didn't coddle me.
She didn't offer empty praise. But she saw potential in the way I sketched, the way I could envision spaces that felt alive and intimate, and she took me under her wing. The beginning was brutal. Endless nights of learning, of mastering programs I had never touched, of convincing clients I could deliver more than a student's portfolio. I doubted myself constantly. The old voices of Jason's smirk and my parents' silence echoed in my head like a relentless drumbeat. There were moments I wanted to give up, moments when I thought, maybe they were right. But I had my grandmother's words, Eleanor's mentorship, and an unshakable desire to prove my worth to myself, if not to them. Then came the first win, a small but high-profile client who believed in my vision. I stayed up all night sketching layouts, choosing colors, arguing with myself about every detail, and when they signed the contract, I felt it, a surge of confidence that almost made the exhaustion fade. From there, others followed. Projects grew, clients recommended me, and slowly, I began to see my little studio take shape, not just in the work I did, but in the reputation I built quietly, carefully, away from their eyes. I never boasted, never posted flashy updates, never hinted at what I was accomplishing. They didn't need to know. I found joy in the small victories. The first large payment I deposited into my account, the first time a client told me I had exceeded their expectations, the first moment I realized I didn't need their validation to feel whole. By the time I returned home for the holidays, my success was my own secret weapon. I had traveled cities, met brilliant minds, expanded my skills beyond what I ever imagined, and built a life that was independent, vibrant, and unassailable. Yet I knew the real test was waiting at that dinner table, the one where Jason had smirked and my parents had watched, the table where I would finally confront the echoes of my past, armed not with anger, but with everything I had worked so tirelessly to achieve. The evening sunlight slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my loft, spilling gold across the minimalist furniture I had handpicked, the abstract paintings I had commissioned, the awards and framed client letters that told a story of years spent clawing upward. I heard the soft chime of the doorbell, and my heart didn't skip. This was the moment I had envisioned countless times, yet nothing could dull the adrenaline that surged through me now. Mom and Dad stepped in first, hesitation in their every step. They were followed by Jason, smirk perfectly in place, probably expecting to find the same timid girl they had dismissed years ago. I let them take it all in, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of realization to begin sinking in. The loft wasn't just a space. It was a testament to every late night, every dollar saved, every failure I had turned into a lesson. Jason's eyes flicked over the skyline view, the sleek lines of my desk, the carefully curated art, and finally, the stack of contracts with client logos they would have recognized if they knew anything at all. His smirk faltered ever so slightly. "Welcome," I said softly, letting my voice carry calm authority. "I'm glad you could come." Mom gasped quietly. Dad's hands trembled as he adjusted his watch, avoiding my gaze.
And Jason?
He swallowed, a bead of sweat forming at his temple as the smug confidence I had known for years began to crack. I gestured toward the leather-bound notebook that rested on my coffee table, the one my grandmother had given me, worn at the edges, a witness to my journey. "You all saw me as incapable," I said. "You doubted me, dismissed me, and left me to figure it out alone. But I did. I built this life. I didn't just survive, I thrived." I pulled out my tablet, scrolling through photos of my completed projects, client testimonials, and financial statements that silently screamed success. This is who I am now. Not the girl you ignored. Not the one you told to leave. This, I tapped the screen lightly, is the woman I became on my own terms. Mom's lips trembled, eyes glossy. Dad's face was pale, jaw tight. And Jason, he simply stared, as if trying to convince himself that this wasn't real, that I hadn't done everything he said I couldn't. I didn't gloat. I didn't let my voice rise in triumph. I let the truth settle over them like sunlight through glass, unforgiving, undeniable. I had gone from trembling beneath their judgment to standing here, grounded, in control, untouchable by the years of dismissal and ridicule. For a long moment, no one spoke. And then Jason, finally, tried to mask his disbelief with a sarcastic cough, but it was too late. The illusion of power he had always held over me had shattered. The dinner table confrontation of years past had been reversed, and I was the one setting the tone now. The girl they had mocked was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, demanded respect, and had earned it without compromise. I smiled faintly, a soft curve of victory, but also of compassion. The room was heavy with the weight of their realization, and in that silence, I let them understand. Everything had changed. I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching the disbelief settle over their faces like dust. The old dynamics, the smirks, the dismissals, the quiet condescension were gone. I could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable. I had the upper hand now, and I intended to wield it with precision, not cruelty. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I want this to be clear. I'm offering a choice. If you want a place in my life moving forward, it will be on my terms, not the ones you imposed when I was younger." Jason's brow furrowed, his arms tightening across his chest. I didn't flinch. "First," I continued, "Jason, you need to understand respect isn't a game. Smirks and threats don't hold power over me anymore. If you want a relationship with me, you will show it through action, not intimidation. You'll apologize, not just the words, but by letting go of the bitterness you've carried since childhood. And you will support your own endeavors rather than trying to undermine others." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, letting him sit with it. "Mom, Dad," I turned to them, "I know you wanted what you thought was best for me, but your silence hurt. To rebuild trust, I need honesty and support. No more dismissals, no more judgments, and no more standing on the sidelines when I need you. You'll need to engage, truly listen, and recognize that my success is mine, earned through effort and perseverance." Their expressions shifted, guilt mixed with awe, but I kept my gaze steady. "And for all of you," I said, drawing my grandmother's notebook from the coffee table, "remember what this represents. Belief, persistence, and courage. You'll need to embrace that, not just for me, but for yourselves. Everyone here has potential, but it won't flourish if old patterns continue." I could see the tension slowly giving way to reflection. This wasn't about punishment, it was about recalibration, about breaking cycles that had kept us trapped in roles we didn't choose. The conditions I laid out weren't just rules, they were invitations to growth, to heal the wounds we'd all carried, knowingly or not. Jason's smirk was gone, replaced by a tentative respect, a recognition that the girl he once mocked was no longer anyone's underling. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached for mine, a silent gesture of reconciliation. Dad's eyes glistened, heavy with the realization that their daughter had become someone untouchable, not just in achievements, but in self-respect. I let it linger a moment longer. This was the first night in years where I wasn't pleading for acceptance, wasn't shrinking to fit into expectations I never agreed to. I was guiding them toward accountability, and in doing so, I claimed the final piece of my own freedom. For the first time, the room felt balanced. The power dynamics had shifted, and the conditions I had set weren't punishment. They were the bridge to the relationships we could all finally rebuild. The weeks that followed were subtle but profound. Jason began showing up in ways I hadn't expected, helping with small errands, checking in without judgment, even asking for advice on projects of his own. Mom and Dad started to listen, really listen, asking questions about my work, my life, my vision, instead of presuming they knew it all. The tension that had haunted our interactions slowly dissolved, replaced by tentative respect and, eventually, warmth. I found myself smiling more during family dinners, noticing the little things that once would have annoyed me. The chipped coffee mug Jason always left on the counter, Mom humming softly while preparing dessert, Dad's quiet presence at the edge of the room. These ordinary moments now carried extraordinary weight because they were different. They were no longer filtered through disappointment or disdain. They were filtered through acknowledgement. One evening, I picked up my grandmother's notebook, tracing the worn edges with my fingers. Its pages were filled with ideas, sketches, and little notes I had written during nights of doubt and exhaustion. It reminded me of the first time I had walked away, of the courage it took to believe in myself when no one else would. I realized that even though I had built a life far beyond the confines of that dining table, that small leather-bound book had quietly guided every step. As I looked around my loft that night, the the city lights spilling through the windows, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had endured pain, rejection, and doubt, yet I had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully myself. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my own, and it was enough. And yet, in the midst of my independence, I found joy in watching them grow alongside me. They were learning, changing, and letting go of old patterns, not because I demanded it, but because they saw the life I had built, resilient, honest, and unapologetically mine. I closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the shelf, a symbol of perseverance, a quiet testament to the girl I once was and the woman I had become. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm authority settle in my chest, and whispered softly to myself, I am enough. I am unstoppable. And I will never be confined again. It wasn't just a statement. It was a promise, an echo of strength, independence, and grace that would carry me through every future challenge, reminding me that the woman I had fought to become would never be silenced, underestimated, or dismissed again.